Hello everybody, it's Lucy Wolfe here. At rather short notice, I had a hole in my diary, so rather than continuing to talk about maybe doing a session, I decided I would do one this morning. And someone, after posting that I was going to do the live Q&A, had lots of different people contacting me telling me about, maybe ways that I could do it. And one way that was suggested to me was to maybe take it in children's age ranges, because otherwise it's too broad. And do you know what? I would never have thought of it myself. So Orla, thank you for that suggestion, because that's what I'm going to do. And I guess I've said this before, I've said it in my posts, in order for me to effectively answer your questions that you're having, you really need to have read the book. You need to be either beginning, halfway through, or the plan, so that I can answer the questions correctly. I'm not in a position to start answering broad questions like how do I get my child to sleep through the night, because if you've read my book, you'll know what's causing the issues and you'll know what you need to do. And the purpose of the Q&As now that I'm planning to do will be to help you move forward better and answer those questions that you have. So I see lots of you joining me, but I don't see any questions yet. But maybe maybe I'm just not seeing them. So I'm looking for your questions, and I know it was kind of short notice that I put this up, that I was going to do it, and I got it wrong. I said I was going to do it at 10 o'clock and it was already nearly 11 o'clock. So again, that'll just tell you how my morning is going. So I'm looking for your questions. If you have any for me, I'll be more than happy to start answering them. And so Elaine, you've asked me, you're following the book and your baby is now 5 months old. When is it best to start the stay and support? And again, I get this question a lot. I don't recommend the stay and support approach until your baby is at least 6 months of age. So I generally anticipate before this time that you work on the information for the younger babies under 6 months of age, so that depending on when you got the book, that maybe you've used the percentage of wakefulness approach. But if you haven't, and if you've only got the book of recent date, then from 6 months onwards, I feel the stay and support approach is how you transition from things that you maybe been doing to help move you forward now. So I hope that answers that for you, Elaine. Sarah, you've asked me what to do with a 10-month-old waking at 1 and 4 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. And again, I guess it depends on where you're at in the plan. So, and again, what decisions that you're making and what you're transitioning away from. So whenever you're making the changes, we always make the changes at bedtime first. So the day you're beginning, you'll use your usual strategies to get your baby to go to sleep. So if you typically nurse by day or rock or roll or drive them in the car, that's what you would do. And then that evening you begin making the bigger changes, and then you need to have your overnight plan established as to what you're changing. Are you phasing out nighttime feeding? Are you stopping bed sharing? Are you stopping getting up in the and going downstairs? And again, whenever you're making that change and you've got your overnight plan in place, you use the stay and support approach that you would have used at bedtime if it was needed, and then you'll begin either your weaning exercise, you're stopping the bed sharing, and you use the stay and support approach, Sarah. So that's how we operate on that basis. So I'll keep my finger on things so that the messages don't go flying on me here. So again, high five, Deirdre. You want some advice on how to unswaddle a 6-month-old. And actually, I've had this question loads over the last couple of days about those of you swaddling your babies. Again, I'm a big fan of the swaddle, but of recent date, the swaddling isn't encouraged for different reasons to do with how tightly parents were swaddling their babies and maybe some hip dysplasia. But again, if you've been swaddling, generally by 16 weeks, that's 4 months, we feel that a swaddle is no longer maybe safe because your baby is ultimately going to start rolling. So again, the way I would do unswaddling is I would put it together as part of the plan that you're changing. And I would just unswaddle. I go from being swaddled to being in a sleeping bag. And I use the stay and support approach. And again, had a little person last week. She was unswaddled. Her hands were all over the place. But again, we supported her through it. And now she's calming down. She's starting to understand what she needs to do with her hands to make herself feel better in order to achieve sleep. So that's how we deal with swaddling. Just bear me 1 second now. Gracie, you're asking about a 5-month-old who can self-soothe to sleep using my methods, but the dummy is a problem through the night. So you'll know from reading in the book that generally the dummy replugs, the amount of dummy replugs that you're doing are generally indicative of an overtired presentation or potential dependency in some capacity. So Gracie, although you say that she is independent using my method, I would just be careful that the last feed, the final feed, is at least 45 minutes before bedtime. Because very often that feed is still partially involved in the context of the sleep, and I suppose you want your nap gap dynamic to be perfectly placed so that you're setting the scene. Now, when you have a dummy user, you may always need to do anywhere from none, which is wonderful, to 2 or 3 in the overnight period. And again, that is typical of dummy users. And again, as your baby's getting older, she's only 5 months. So again, she's still really young. But as she starts to get a little bit older, you can start put into her hand and guide her hand up to her mouth. Or, of course, beyond 6 months, with the consent from your GP, you can start to maybe stop using the dummy and support her again with the stay and support approach to begin with, and then take it from there. So I hope that's helpful to you, Gracie. Let me see there now who else is asking questions. Sorry, I'm scrolling up through them, which is good. So Rachel, I think, is asking any tips on getting the 6-month-old to nap longer than 45 minutes. Again, Rachel, it depends on where you're at in the plan, because that depends on, where they're at, whereabouts you are. So in the beginning of making your changes, I don't focus on duration of sleep. And again, to be clear, I don't focus on duration of sleep anytime. Where daytime sleep is concerned, I'm typically looking for certain parameters, and I'm definitely looking to create the balance between sleeps. When we have the balance between sleeps, it's more likely that we can get a better duration of sleep from them. So nap 1, I generally like to be at least 45 minutes, and nap 2, in the fullness of time, I like to be at least an hour plus in duration. But at the beginning of your plan, you might find your naps are quite short, and we go with that initially. We focus on application, not duration. And then if you're 10-14 days in the plan, then I would start to do some mid-nap work on the mid-nap. So if, let's say, nap 2 was under the hour, I might start spending another 20 or 30 minutes in stage 1 trying to resettle them back to sleep. And again, but generally I find that if you work on all of the parameters, the daytime sleep improves of its own accord and you don't need to do anything. I hope that's helpful. I'm missing a message there also to add, she will also still wake during the night. I don't know what that message, I've missed that as it's come in. Just bear me now 1 second. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit more. It's this that I don't like about the live sessions, that I can't keep up with the questions that come in. But look, I'll do my best, and I'm sure that you understand. Lou, you ask about how important is it to nap in the cot. We're still napping on the move quite a bit, seeing progress overnight a couple of weeks in, which is wonderful. Well done. Again, I've done a post on this about, is it important to have naps in the cot? Best practice supports cot sleep. It is the better type of sleep for your child to get. But again, I know it's not always possible, and again, doesn't always fit in with the lifestyle. I think getting the sleep is more important than where it happens. If I had to pick, I would definitely go for the cot for nap 1 and nap 2 specifically. Or I might look for a ratio of 80-20 where 80% of the naps are cot based with a 20% flexibility. But again, it's like everything. If it's working, and the nights are improving, then we'd say no action required. So if you're having your naps in the go, your baby's well rested as a result, they still sleep well overnight, then there's no need to necessarily change anything. The only thing I look forward to is that you think about if I'm going back to work and they're going to sleep in a creche or daycare, I would like them to know how to do that at home before we transition them to the daycare. And secondly, I think that they're going to nap until they're 3. And so I just think ahead to saying it would be good to establish the skill of being able to nap both in the cot and in the buggy too, because that gives you the flexibility across the board. How am I doing? Sarah, you're saying that your 8-month-old is in your room and waking up several times a night. I've read your book and I want to start straight away. What should I do first? So you know from reading the book, I get you to make those decisions, you know, those key decisions at the beginning. So, and I actually encourage you to make those decisions and more or less do everything all in the one go, rather than a drip feed scenario where you do small things. Everybody does it on their own steam though. So again, when I'm not working with you directly, you'll do what feels right for you ultimately. But again, if it was me, I'd be saying, we'll move her into her own room. I'll move one of the parents or both them into their room, it's a little boy, into their room with him. I'd obviously start spending lots of non-sleep time in the bedroom with him. I would be doing the cot acclimation exercises with him too. And then I would begin whatever night you're deciding, maybe it's the Friday night, you know I like the Friday night, that we begin making all the changes with him in his own bedroom, but with you camping out with him, and then start making all of the changes. So look, it's nearly Friday. Why don't you start making those changes? Start changing the nappies in that new bedroom, playing games in the bedroom, getting him dressed in the bedroom, and then you can start to familiarise him more. You establish your bedtime routine in the bedroom that you want him to sleep in, and then you take it from there. So I wish you every success with making the changes that you plan. Let me just have another little look, because I'm worried that I'm missing some of the messages that come in. And again, I won't stay too long this morning because I've got people coming to my practice today. I've got other parents that I am calling to see how they're getting on that I'm working with directly. So Lynn, you said something about your baby being 6.5 months and mixed fed. You want to move exclusively to the bottle, however she's always fed to sleep and loves it for comfort. Is it okay to go cold turkey and move her into the room at the same time? I hate the word cold turkey because I kind of feel that we're never really doing cold turkey. But again, I like to reposition things. But just like the question I answered a moment ago, I tend to make the adjustments all in one go. So if you're deciding you want them in their own room, you're beginning on working on improving their sleep, I try to make those key decisions at the front end. And then whenever the sleep is starting to work better, you don't really have to change much. So again, I wouldn't, if your baby is fed to sleep, I would still keep doing that as a breastfeed, but I would do it separate to sleep as outlined in my book, The Baby Sleep Solution. Rose, I'm not answering questions on 10-week-olds today. I'm just dealing with 6 to 8 months for this particular session. But I do appreciate you tuning in, but I'm going to just stick to the age range today, if that's okay with you. And the same for any other questions that are coming in. It's too broad, so I just wanted to stick to the little younger age range in this particular session. Sinead, you're saying about your 7-month-old son who's on solids over a month, not great at sleeping but following the plan and having some limited success, and recently started pooing again at night. I often feel that when they start pooing at night, again, if you've only been on solids for a month, there's a huge change in the digestive system, but I often feel that it's teething related more than anything else. And again, I suppose it depends on what changes that you've made, but again, if you're starting to see some progress, I would encourage you to, separate the feeding from sleep, wherever you've decided you want your baby to sleep, and then work on the overnight plan thereafter. Obviously, if they're pooing overnight, you need to change the nappy, do it with the least disruption as possible. And then sometimes I'd get you to keep a food diary to see, is there a relationship between some food that you're giving him and the pooing overnight. But generally I feel it's teething related more than anything else. And then that passes, thank goodness. So again, I just have a couple more questions that I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to leave you for today. One of you here is asking about when should night feeding stop. I can't make that decision with you without knowing everything about your baby, and again, what you're doing, how you're doing it. What I can tell you is that lots of children need feeding up to as old as 12 months. Lots of children are ready to drop a night feed from 7 months plus. Again, there's too much variability. I would never like to comment on that basis. What I encourage you to do is discuss that with your GP or your health visitor, and then based on what they have suggested, based on your feeding practice and your child's weight, stage, age, then you could maybe begin looking at my phasing out the nighttime feed part of the plan from the book, and hopefully that is helpful to you. Just going to answer 2 more questions, then I'm going to let you go for today. I have a question here about a 6.5-month-old who's been following the new routine for a few days, struggling with nap times as she won't sleep for longer than about 30 minutes. Don't worry about that, okay? Don't worry about nap duration at all as you begin. It's really not what we're worried about. Worry about application. don't worry about duration. You're a couple of days in, it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for naps to come together. So your task right now is to fill in all the other little gaps. Get really good at your baby going to sleep with the new approach. Maybe even start using stages to sleep then by moving further away. Continue to support your baby in the overnight period for longer as needed. And then after about 10 days of starting the plan, we generally see the daytime sleep starting to lengthen of its own accord. But if it doesn't, then you can start working on the mid-nap lengthening that I talk about in the book, which means that you help them for, up to 20 or 30 minutes trying to resettle them. But very often I don't think that's needed. I find that if you're following all of the guidelines, the longer naps come as a result of that. I'm just going to do one more question and then I'm going to go. There's Emma here is just asking about your nap. Again, it's naps still short, which we've talked about. So again, it depends on where you're at in the plan. So if you're early days in the plan, it's just the nature of the process. And again, if you're longer at the plan and the naps are still short, then you can start doing the mid-nap training. So look, as a result of that, I want to just answer one more question and then I'm going to go. And it's 2 weeks into the plan, 6 months old, wakes routinely at 5 a.m. and also during the night, will not asleep in the crib after this, too early to start the day, 3 naps, bedtime 7, any help. When you're working through the plan, and you're 2 weeks in. So again, by 2 weeks, I typically expect, depending now on the decisions that you've made and the changes that you've made, that we are sleeping routinely quite well until 5, but then we're awake, ready to start the day. You have to go through the motions on the 5 o'clock waking. So you've got to go through it. You've got to use the stay and sport approach. We all know your baby is not going to go back to sleep at that time. You've got to do your time. And then don't start the day before 6. And then right now, I'd want you to be avoiding naps before 8 and then moving them along so you're not facilitating that early wake. And then you are making sure that you have followed all of the guidelines with specific attention to your last feed, okay, and the nap gap dynamic, because they hamper the progress where the early waking is concerned. And then I generally expect to see 5 o'clock waking diminish over week 3 and week 4. So again, you've got a little bit to go, but it is about being really precise about how you deal with that waking at 5 to make sure that it doesn't stay. And at the moment, it's not early rising, it's early learning. And again, that will pass, provided you follow all of the little guidelines in the book. So look, it was my first attempt today doing a little Q&A. I'm certain I didn't get to all of the questions, but again, you can see there some of the questions are repeat, and so maybe what you were going to ask has already been answered. I'm going to get better at this, and I will hope to share things with you more as the weeks go by. And if you haven't already, the book is The Baby Sleep Solution. I hear from people that there's long delays with Amazon, so you can order directly from me on my website sleepmatters.ie, and we can send it out straight away to you. And if you want to work with me directly, because if you're finding it more challenging than you would like, then you can always email me, lucy@sleepmatters.ie. I'd love to hear from you and work with you on a one-to-one basis as well. So I'll let you go for today. It's been my absolute pleasure. We'll see you again soon.